for our vision meetings, I wanted us to just start recording this conversations, and then we'll upload them somewhere for just reference, just for like, if you guys want to hear it again, or if someone was on vacation, you can hear what we talked about at vision meeting. And a lot of what vision meeting, well, it was supposed to be until I got sick, was me just kind of pouring in and like developing and spending time with our team and our staff. And really, it's not really vision as much as it is development in a lot of ways. And kind of the best way I think of it is it's kind of like our once a month small group where we kind of get to come together. We're kind of like our once a month church. Like on Sundays, it is kind of hard to receive sometimes because we're all over the place doing all sorts of stuff. But this is like I'm crafting a leadership message or a conversation for you guys. I don't care if you share it. It's not like a secret. So also the goal is just to start making a library of stuff where if someone asks, hey, how do you do this? Or how do you do that? Or, you should listen to this podcast, if you would, that Pastor Chris did. And I think that would really help you in that conversation or what you're working on or things like that. Okay. So that's why I thought, you know what, let's just set up a mic and we can record it. Sorry, hold on, my shoe's acting all funny on me. Perfect. There we go. Cool. All right. So are we good? Now we're going to start. All right. Cool. So first off, what an amazing Easter. Come on. Shout out team. Y'all did it. And we normally don't necessarily go through numbers every week in this meeting, but we reviewed it in exec and we reviewed it at locations. And in person, we crossed 3,100 people over the weekend, which is absolutely crazy. 3,000. The exact number we think, and we only rounded up like by 10 or 15 a service just because we kind of miss people going to the restrooms and stuff, was 3,143. And then we think it was about 800 people online around there. This is Friday and Sunday, so this is the whole weekend. So anywhere between 3,800 to 4,000 people, if that's accurate, which we think it is. So I won't include the online number. I'm just like, hey, we had over 3,000 plus people over the weekend, definitely in person. And we felt it. Friday was off the hook. Sunday was amazing too, but Friday was amazing. And it's just really cool. For me, it was a really surreal weekend. One, I'm just grateful for this team, that God is still continuing to stretch us and we can have really big goals. Like, all right, we're going to go from 2,000 to 3,000 in 1 year. And everyone was like, all right, let's run it. But then two, a lot of what we did for Easter, I wasn't really involved in. And so that was really cool from my perspective. And so I want to just honor you guys. Thank you for just doing the job well, accomplishing the vision of the house well, moving forward, loving our people well. Out of all those 3,000, whatever amount of people, I know there was someone who their life, Jesus did something significant this weekend. Probably more than one, but I know one for sure. And that's the cool thing about doing big days that I remind myself is I'm not doing it for the crowd. I'm doing it for one person. Like one person is worth it. And the bigger the crowd is, the more we'll find that one person, if that makes sense. Like that one person will have that opportunity, that experience to encounter Jesus. And so for me, it was very different in that to think that, 2 months before? Yeah, because it was the 20th. I think I went down on 216 or 217. So like literally 60 days before that. I'll be honest, it was really hard, and I've already shared kind of everything that happened and what went down, and most of you kind of know just everything that took place between health-wise and the stuff that was coming up, nervousness-wise and trauma-wise, and then the kidney stone on top of that, which was the icing on the cake. There was a strong moment in there where I really thought, I don't know if I'm going to be able to like come back and do this again. And this was the conversation I was going to have last month, and then I was sick that day. The reason being was because I didn't know what was happening, right? So I didn't want to like quit, and I didn't think I really was going to quit, but there was something in me that was like, if I can't figure this out, I don't know if I'm gonna like come back. Like I really was there. And it was really, really hard and really, really dark and a really broken place. And why I say that is because a lot of what God did in this season when I went down is still getting kind of revealed, and I'm starting to write about it. And I believe that God's going to use that season, like he uses every season, to develop us and stretch us. So to go from, and it really wasn't like a lead pastor. I want to break it down a little more. I was at a place in probably February, early March time where I thought I never was going to be able to preach again. Two things. I never thought I was going to be able to preach again, and I never thought I was going to be able to lead a meeting that was heavy again, because I didn't know that what was going on with me, if it was going to keep happening, if anything that happens that's stressful or weighty comes my way. So I thought, if this is how I'm going to feel, where every time I do something that's stressful or weighty, which is my whole life here, I don't necessarily do a lot. I want you to understand the dynamic of my role here. In some ways, I don't work, I don't want to say as hard because that's not true, but as specific in the details and the minutes as you guys. But everything that I do in my role specifically, which is just how I lead the team and my part of playing whatever part I play in this thing, everything I've learned I do now is weighty. Everything affects so much more. It affects families. It affects legacies. It's generational stuff. And honestly, I don't necessarily trip on that. I don't lose sleep like at all. I'm like, all right, we're just going to do it. And right, Jesus' yoke is easy and his burden's light. And we try to lean on that. But there is a toll that takes, which if you're called, then you're good. But when you're sick, how do you do that when you're sick? That was the thing in my brain. Like, is this always going to be my response? And so one of the things why happened immediately that I realized as I started having those thoughts was part of what was happening at that moment when I was down and Nessa was watching me just down and all messed up, was this is a attack on the calling of my life. Like I had to recognize that quickly. And so a lot of what I want to talk to you guys today about, which is probably one of the main leadership conversations the Lord's been having with me, is this conversation of calling. Okay, so if you're taking notes, I want to entitle this conversation, What Are You Called To? What are you called to? And I want to talk through this idea of calling with you guys. I have a ton of notes. I have a ton of stuff that I've written down. I actually just wrote it down a little while ago just to put it all together. And I'm going to send you these notes in just a minute as well, just in case you missed something. But I want to talk about calling. And specifically, why I think it's so important to talk about calling is most jobs, you don't have to intertwine your calling with the job in some ways. Some ways you do. I believe everything you do is a function out of your calling, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But when it comes to like church work, your calling is definitely on the forefront. And what I've learned is if you're not functioning in your calling, you're going to burn yourself out much quicker. And that your calling is such a priority to how you develop as a leader, as someone who follows Jesus, and trying to lead others to follow Jesus. Because that's the hard part of what we do. We don't just do a job. We also help others follow Jesus. Like, that's so complicated. Like, if you just worked for like the organization that saves puppies, you know what I'm saying? Or whatever that organization is. Like, your job is just to save puppies. Or to do the numbers to save puppies. Or to create the song list that plays for puppy saving. I don't know. Like, it's just very, and then if you're done saving puppies for the day, you get to go home and just do you and not worry about saving puppies. But what we do is we do the job, but then also there's like this discipleship, apprentice following Jesus calling that we also all have, that we carry, that never leaves us as well. And that's why sometimes it could feel a little overwhelming or daunting that I've learned. I'll be honest, I've never felt overwhelmed by that reality. I never gotten super uncomfortable. There's moments where I'm having like a rough day and then I got to go to Target and I got to see like 10 people from church and I'm like, I don't really want to say hi, but I got to say hi because I don't want to be a jerk. Like that's always going to be there. But for the most part, I've always been okay. And I think the reason being is because I understood that I was on a path to really amount to nothing because of the brokenness of my family. Like I was a statistic. I was supposed to go to jail. I was supposed to end up in prison. I was supposed to die. I was supposed to be a gang member. Like there was a path written for me. There was a purpose that the world had for me in my naturally born environment. So everything I do now, even the hard days, I'm grateful because I knew what it was going to be. Some of you don't have that. Some of you maybe who grew up in church or always knew, like let's say you had amazing parents and they always champion like you're going to be awesome, you're going to be amazing, you're going to do something special. In some ways that's great because then you didn't have to go through that trauma stuff, which is the stuff that came back to bite me, and that was no fun. But then sometimes what you do have to do is combat that entitlement that, man, the calling of God on my life could be better if I like made it up myself or I decided to do something. And so that's a tension you have to experience that's a little different. Needless to say, the conversation of calling, I think, is a unique one for pastors and church leaders. Because what I do believe is if you do not function out of your calling, then what you're going to do, which is essentially functioning out of your identity, if you don't function out of your calling and your identity, you're probably functioning for something else. Yeah. And we've all preached this, and we all know this, that if you live your life for something instead of from something, disaster, it's on its way. Yeah. Right? And so let's walk through this. What are you called to? Let's talk about your calling. Let's have a conversation on calling. And I want to walk through some of the things that God's been revealing to me, reminding me of what I'm called to in this season. All right, Galatians chapter 1 is going to be the launching verse. It says this, and then we're going to go to Acts chapter 9, 15, and 16, which we talked about a couple weeks ago. So I want to use Paul as really the main framework for this leadership conversation. I think Paul's identification of calling is so significant. Peter's probably a good one too. The idea of being a fisher and then fishers of men, really, really good stuff. But I like Paul in that he writes a lot about it. So Galatians is one of my favorite letters in this season. And one of the reasons why I think it's so good is because I have a personal theory about the book of Galatians that I don't know if Paul was ready to write that book yet. If you read it, it's responsive. As where if you read Romans, which is like his Magna Carta of theological writings, you know, it's brilliant. Like Romans is up there. I mean, Pastor Dylan, you're a Pauline guy, so right, his higher level theological framework ones, people argue about Hebrews, so I'm not going to throw that one in there. But right, they would say Romans is it, and then there's another one. I forget which one. Probably Colossians. That's what I was thinking. Like it's non-reactive. Galatians is very reactive. Paul plants these group of churches in the region of Galatia. They are circumcising each other for no reason. And he has to write a letter because he can't be there physically. And so why it's fascinating to me is because the first part of Galatians, the book of Galatians, is all Paul proving to them his apostolic authority and his calling as an apostle. It's so personal. And it starts off with probably his most personal introduction. Galatians 1:1 is really the launching verse for this conversation. Paul, so his new name, not his old name, an apostle, not from men nor through men, but through Jesus Christ and God the Father who raised him from the dead, right? And so his new name, his identity, his, if you would, calling in one word, which that word apostle will break down in the Acts verse, and then who it's from. The calling's not from anybody else. It's only through Jesus. And who is Jesus? Who is the Father, who him and the Father are one and the same, and who he was risen. And then he goes on, right? And you go down to verse like 10, 11, and he talks about how if I wanted the approval of man, I would not be a follower of God, which is such a gangster statement. Like that thing's such next level. And then he goes down about how he got saved and how he got discipled and his time in Arabia and his time in Damascus. And then he talks about fighting with Peter. And it's just this crazy like monologue of him just telling these dudes, you need to believe me, and this is why. And he is validating, if you would, the calling on his life through the experiences he's been through. But everything he's doing in that chapter 1 and chapter 2, before he then corrects them, it's connected and it's functioning out of his calling. And why I think he possibly wasn't planning on writing it, because it sounds like when you have to respond to someone on an Instagram comment for posting something dumb. Like it wasn't a planned message. It was I have to react now to this thing and let me respond. And then what ends up becoming this responsive pastoral letter ends up being his, I guess, first canon letter that makes him Paul, the brilliant theological writer of the New Testament. Cool? And we'll get to more of that in a minute. Acts 9, Jesus defines his calling a little more. And it's that verse 15 and 16 where he says to Ananias, go, for he is a chosen instrument of mine. So God called him, again, it's that whole idea, to carry my name. And then he defines his calling of him carrying the name of God. So preaching, teaching, speaking. His whole calling is to the Gentiles, is to kings, and then to the children of Israel. And then connected to his calling is this idea of suffering. For I will show him how much he must suffer for the sake of my name. Right? And so Paul has this incredible calling to go to the Gentiles, to reach kings, to reach the nation of Israel, that he's an apostle, leader of the church, in his new name, new identity, and all this. And so why I think this is really important is what you're going to notice is all these conversations that are connected to this idea of calling. He's not talking about what he's doing in his calling rather than who he is in his calling. And so just if you're taking notes, the first point is your calling is unique to your identity. And so a lot of this conversation today is an identity conversation. And I think it's so important for us to understand that each one of us have a unique calling because you all have a unique identity, right? It's that whole message that preachers preach about no one's DNA is exactly the same and all that stuff. It's true. Like my calling is not the same as Luis's. Luis's calling is not the same as Juan's. Juan's calling is not the same as Megan's. Everyone in this room has a calling. Every follower of Jesus has a calling, right? And so everyone has a specific calling on their life. So here's what I learned that the Lord really hit me with, which I've always known that. But here's what I learned when I was sick, is that, and it's something I always knew, but it really landed with me this time, and God really challenging me, is that you will always be bombarded in the opposite of what your calling is. And so whatever you're called to, of who you are on the inside, what the enemy will do is call you to the opposite of who you are. And so for me, I'll give you an example. I feel like always since I was younger, like if I were to break down some of the language and verbiage of my calling, you know, and I could show you this in a little bit. And I think we even did this with some interns back in the day a little while ago. But if you were to break it down, one of the main thread lines of my life is I feel I am called to, through Jesus, of course. All this is through Jesus. So it's going to sound it's a very self conversation, but all this through the gospel. So just in case anyone hears this later and it's like, oh, this is self-talk. No, it's not. Okay. But I've always felt a grace and a calling to bring healing to people. Like that, like the dreams, the visions, like God called me to be a preacher. I preach so that way God can heal people. I lead so that way God can heal people. I disciple so that way healing can happen. And across the board, and it's just like this idea of healing, change, transformation. It's the thing that it bleeds out of you, right? Like if you were to cut you open, what bleeds out of you spiritually? Like if you could spiritually bleed, what would come out of you? What is that? That's always been a thing. And so to be honest, for the last couple of years, the thing that I felt that I have had to fight is being unhealthy. And it's something actually the Lord has really been speaking to me even before I went down. And I remember writing this note. I think it was at Radiant Conference last year, or one of those conferences I went to. I remember writing a note like, how can I release healing on people if I am sick? And sick in any way, like, and so for me, I have a lot of language for this in particular, because this is what I feel called to. So then it's what I preach about the most. So right, we talk about, I can't be financially sick. I can't be physically sick. I can't be emotionally sick. There can be seasons where it can come, but like, am I doing what I need to do to be healthy? And it was really this big thought, like, if I am not healthy, then my church can't be healthy. If I'm not healthy, my preaching can't be healthy. If I'm not healthy, my kids can't be healthy. And if health is the thing that I'm called to, and healing is the thing that I'm called to, again, this is me personally, then of course what's going to be the temptation I always try to fall into is unhealthiness. Does that make sense? Yeah, that's good. So let me break it down a little more. And if we talk about the idea of calling, I don't believe it's just a job and stuff, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but everyone in here has a specific calling. So I'll use Pastor Matt, for example, because me and Pastor Matt like have talked about this, and we've talked about the idea of calling a lot, as he was even navigating this next season and what is he called to. One of the things Matt's always felt called to, or part of his calling, and I think you can all agree, is Pastor Matt's kind of like an awakening guy, like this idea of waking up the church, this idea of, and I didn't even tell Pastor Matt I was going to do this, so sorry, bro, but I'm just going to roll with it. Like calling people to awaken, to follow, to go after, right? There's a certain language he says that's not like my language entirely. Yeah. So throughout the years, I know that the thing that then Matt had to fight and struggle with is this sloth or slumber or laziness, because it's the opposite of what he's called to. And so what you need to do is you need to become self-aware of what you are called to, so that way you can anticipate what the enemy's trying to bombard you with, so you become what you're not. And I'll tell you right now, just on a team dynamic, you will become what you're not to the people in this room and to your immediate families before you ever will the rest of the people. Now, we don't need to go through a lesson, and we don't need to write on the walls and send an email of what we're called to, and we're not trying to do all that. But like, you need to be self-aware. If you are called to bring an atmosphere, and like I've talked with Pastor Humberto about that, like Pastor Humberto for years, and again, callings can kind of not necessarily change, I believe, but they can grow and develop and adapt language. But since you were living at the house, we talked about how God always calls you to moments of, worship and encounter and creating atmosphere. It's really that atmosphere word. Like, you are called to create atmospheres where people can truly encounter Jesus, whether that's through, and then now it's like production stuff. And for first it was like you playing drums, and then all of that, like, and big stuff. You were called to like high moments of scale, atmospheric stuff. So then what's the opposite of that? If that's the grace on your life to create an atmosphere where God can come in the room, then there's the opposite side of your life where you have a grace to kill what God's doing in the room. You know what I'm saying? Not saying you do it all the time, just saying you have the potential to do that, right? If you have a grace on your life to speak life into someone, you just have the same amount of grace to speak death into someone. Like, the opposite's always the same. Pastor Dylan has always had this thing of joy on his life. Joy and kindness, and the calling to really love on people who are depressed and sad, and not to bring joy. And in the same way he could breathe the life of the party is the same way things can die down. If I'm getting too personal, I'm sorry, but it's just, right? I'm just helping identify some things. Pastor Ben has always had a calling of loyalty and unity, but then there's been seasons where he's had to navigate this, where he doesn't even realize he's disconnecting people on accident, and that can happen as well. And he's had to figure that, like, we're all in a process. And I could be honest with myself. The same way I have brought healing to people in my young years leading as a 20-year-old, just wilding out doing things, I've damaged people. I've made people unhealthy just as much as I made people healthy. And so that's just a personal action side. Then we're going to dive into a little deeper thing. If the enemy knows that, the enemy's going to try to do what he can to make you to not be able to do what you're called to do. That's all I'm going to say. So for the first time in my life, I can honestly say, I think why it was so heavy is I was attacked in every single aspect. Like spiritually, I was so unhealthy before this season. Of course I pray in the prayer room. Of course I try to read, but I was not consistent. So spiritually, I was definitely in a decay. And you'll notice I tend to preach what I need to be preached to. So if we're going to go through the series on hunger and desperation, you best believe it's because your guy needs hunger and desperation, okay? And so there was already that. We came out of the most unhealthiest financial season of our marriage with our houses. That was wild. Thank God we sold the house, praise Jesus. But since we were tighter now than we were when we first got married, when I worked and we lived in the garage and Nessa was working part-time. That's crazy to me. That's so insane. Of course, God got us through, but the pressure of that. Physically, I wasn't doing well, wasn't working out, overweight. And then emotionally, I thought I was okay, right? Intellectually, my mind and my thoughts wasn't in control as much as it was. And then the only thing I can say is relationally, I felt probably the healthiest out of those than all of them, but I'm still trying to navigate some of these new relationships with this new season as lead pastor, trying to navigate my new season with my friends in the room. I'm trying to navigate not having, the spiritual covering of Pastor Eric so consistently in my life. That was such a big thing for me for years. There's all these dynamics, and this didn't happen in 1 month. This happened the last 2-3 years. And then here comes this traumatic, crazy thing that triggered me to, I don't know, God knows where, from when I was 10 years old. And then in that season, it was everything wasn't out. So I was spiritually sick. I felt like I couldn't pray. I felt like I couldn't read. I remember one of the craziest things when I was going through in that moment was, I guess when you experience that level of nervousness or trauma or whatever I experienced, I just didn't even think God was there. Even though I knew he was. And I've never had that thought in 20 years. That, wow, just God's not even involved with this at all. I'm just going through this on my own. That was the first time I ever thought of that. So my spirit was decayed. I felt empty. My emotions were emptied because I thought all this stuff with my brothers. And so physically I was hurting. I was nauseous, right? My mind, I couldn't think. I couldn't process. I couldn't sleep. It was everything that could come at me came at me. And now, don't get me wrong, it didn't last 2 months. It just lasted 2 days, okay? Because I had to, and I remember the key moment, which started, I felt like I started getting better, even though it was a really hard process, was I had this moment where I knew, I was gonna message prep that Tuesday for Sunday. It was the first week it went down, and I couldn't do it. And I thought, this is crazy. I can't even write. I can't even eat. I can't, and right, I'm never gonna preach again. So then by Thursday, I just remember I was downstairs, and I said, all right, if I'm never going to preach again, I'm still going to preach to myself. So I paced back and forth downstairs in my living room. I told Nessa, go upstairs. You don't need to hear this. And she said, okay. And she went upstairs and the kids, and I preached to myself for 45 minutes. I paced back and forth and I preached the greatest message to my heart, even though I didn't make sense at all. And I'll be honest, I just preached everyone else's messages that I heard the last 2 years. I preached Pastor Eric and Pastor Obed and Pastor Chris Durso and Pastor Roger messages. I just combined it all. And I said, you know what, enemy? I don't care. I don't care. If I never preach to anyone, that's fine. But you ain't going to let me not preach to myself. I'm going to preach to myself forever because I can't stress myself out even more than what I'm stressed out right now. And I preached to myself. And I ate food while I was preaching to myself. I was nibbling on crackers. And it was tears. And it was in this reality where I was wow, I'm sick. And the enemy wants me sick. Yeah. Because if I'm sick, I can't do what I'm called to do. And so, Jesus, I need you to help me, either heal me and then give me the discipline enough to not make it easy for the enemy to make me sick. God, if you want me and allow me to be sick, I trust you with that. So that's part of the process too. Like, God allows things, I'm cool. But what is this? And is there, I think at the end of the day, most of it was the enemy. Most of it was family situations. Most of it was outside. But man, was there 10 or 15% of me in there that made this a little worse than what it was? And so Pastor Jacob Aranza, he told me this one time, and it was so good, and I didn't realize this till really this year. He calls it the 3 W's, okay? And so he says there's 3 W's to what you're called to. And I think most of us only think of the first one, and we don't realize the second and the third. And this is what he's talking to with his son, who is kind of stepping up into higher leadership and probably transitioning into an executive role or maybe even a lead pastor role. They're kind of praying on some things. His son Joseph's actually going to come preach during Friends of the House in August, okay? And so he told his son, which essentially what he was telling me when I transitioned, he says the first one is work, right? Calling's work. And so whenever we look at the calling on our life, we think of work. But we don't consider the 2 other ones. So the first one's work. The second one is wait. And the last one is warfare. So what he told his son is, son, I'm not worried that you can do the work. You can do the work. But can you handle the weight? And can you resist the warfare? And I thought about it, man, especially as young leaders, we think we're called to things because we can handle the work. We think we're called to things because I can preach better than that person. I can lead better than that person. I can do planning center better than that person. But there's a weight and there's a warfare. There is. And we have to be aware of the weight and the warfare. And why that matters is because at the end of the day, and I think this is this moment where I was preaching to myself, something this pastor said, which I think it was at ARC when we went to Palm Springs where he talked about it. At the end of the day, only you can contend for your calling. I can't fight for your calling. I can champion it. I can celebrate it. I can help keep it accountable. We have people in our... But whatever Nessa is called to do, Nessa is called, she's always been called to raise up, develop leaders. It just so happens now she's doing it at church. We thought it was going to be in the education space. She got her degree in education. She thought she was, her goal when she was younger is I'm going to be the head of a preschool development program at Delta or MJC, and I'm going to raise up preschool teachers who have a Christian worldview, and I'm going to change curriculum and thought processes and systems and structures so that way next level leaders can develop people well. It's always been the thing. Like, she's always been a discipleship pathway person. Even that's how she raises the kids, okay? So, but I can't fight for that for her. I can help give language, I can help identify, I can encourage, I can strengthen, I can challenge, I can provoke, but you are the only one that can fight for your calling. You're the only one. You're the only one that has to bleed your calling in and out, because your calling is so internal because it's connected to your identity. Your calling is a relationship with you, right? And so the question I would have is the relationship with your calling, which essentially is the relationship with yourself, healthy? Like, do you have a relationship with your calling? I know that sounds kind of interesting, but do you have a relationship with yourself? How is your self-talk? How is your self-thought process? How is your self-demeanor? How is your self-leadership? How do you handle yourself when it's just you? Tim Timberlake described it like this: your calling or your dream is your invisible companion that never leaves you. And I thought that's a great example. Like, it's just kind of always there. And this is why it's really sad when you have people who are in church and they're called, but then they disqualify themselves because of sin. It's heartbreaking because they can't even now function out of the calling because of the decisions that they made. Now, I think there's redemption and restoration. They might not be able to do the exact same things, but they can still in some way be called to what they're deep down called to. But that's such a heartbreaking process of when a leader falls like that. Because, they didn't just hurt the body, they hurt themselves. They didn't just hurt their family, they hurt themselves. They have to be with them forever, right? Matthew 22 explains it well, right, teacher? What's the greatest commandment? And he said to him, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. Verse 38, this is the first commandment, and the second is like it, right? You shall love your neighbor as yourself. You ain't gonna make it in this if you don't learn how to love yourself. You can't love yourself unless you love your calling. Your calling is the mission that God gave you on this earth. It's your why. He's your why, and then that's the next step of your why, right? And I can tell when you're in this room and you're not functioning out of your calling. I can tell. Don't get me wrong, bad days are bad days. It's different. But I've had people in this room or seasons where they have gotten lost or caught up with something other than what they're really, really called to do. Vocations change, job changes, seasons change, people transition. That's different. I can tell. I can tell when someone's trying to function out of calling or not. I'll give a great example. Pastor Doug and Pastor Shauna, they're not leaving because of a bitterness or a lack of their calling. Like, they're called just to do what they do somewhere else. That is much different than, like, I'm not going to function in my calling anymore because I'm just unhealthy or there's a brokenness to me and I don't want to fix that. Does that make sense? Yeah. And so that's the whole thing. A couple more thoughts, okay? You guys follow me? We good? Yeah. So here's what I would challenge. You got to, right, the first one is your calling is unique. Your opposite, bombarded. I'm just main thoughts on calling. You can only contend for your calling. What's the relationship you have with your calling? Because love the calling that you have. And do not have an affair in your heart with another calling. And I actually shared that when we did our network conference. Don't fall in love with someone else's calling. You think of Hosea and Gomer. Like, Hosea, he was given the wife the Lord gave him, and the Lord's like, you will love her. Fall in love with the calling you have. Because it was never, in a way, your calling to choose in the first place. See, that's the thing you have to understand. You don't get to choose your calling. The Lord gives you your calling. What did God say to Ananias about Paul? His calling is a calling to Gentiles, kings, and then the children of Israel. And his calling is a calling of suffering. And some of us are like, man, you might not like it. But I've learned, like, I love it. Like, I love the calling on my life. Not the preaching, not that's, we'll talk about that in a minute, but not that. I love that no matter where I'm at for the rest of my life, and I had to go there with the Lord when I was sick, it's like, I'm still going to bring healing to people. I'm still going to bring, if maybe this means if everything shut down, I'm bringing healing to my family. And I'm going to stop this generational trauma so that way my kids can live healthy for the rest of their life. I think that's why Pastor Eric, or God sent me a father like Pastor Eric. He didn't send me the most dynamic, although he's very dynamic. At first, he wasn't the most dynamic. If he's hearing this, that's okay. But like that I judged, but right, like he didn't send me the guy with the Instagram and the status, but I can't think of a healthier leader than Eric Baca. Like, the dude's healthy, it's scary, in a lot of ways, like emotionally, and especially like emotionally and relationally, and all the things I was super unhealthy with. God was like, I'm gonna send you someone that's healthy. And so I don't want to have an affair in my heart with a calling I wish I had. I think a lot of individuals, a lot of young leaders, we do that. If only I can do that. If only if I can be that. If only God could put me there. And I'll just be honest, the more you do that, the less God's going to do it. Because it's weird. It's such a weird dynamic. The more you want it, it's like, okay, why do you want it? And then the less you want it, that's when he trusts you more. It's so like, this was the last thing I wanted to do, was be the lead pastor of Thrive, which is home church now, right? Like everyone thought that's what I came for here for. I was like, no, I thought I was going to be gone in a year. Pastor Eric thought I was going to be gone in a year. I remember you had a conversation. Let's see if he lasts 6 months. Serious. So when the role opened, it made sense because it was part of my calling. Right? I'm called to bring healing to people. My skill is communication and gifting and leadership. I'm called to a specific people group, which is California. Okay, this church is in California. That's great. It all kind of lines up. Cool. Let's go. Like, let's run it, right? Where I don't want to have this affair in my heart where I want to be called to do this. And why can't I be this guy? Or why can't I do this thing? Or why can't I have this? And again, what's the difference between, man, I know God's calling me, so God build me to that whenever you're ready, versus I desire that, I desire that, I desire that. Again, it's the from something for something. Only you can identify that. Only you really know. And you need to determine what's like God dreaming with you for your future and your calling, or an affair you're having of a calling that you should not have. Cool? So how do I identify my calling? Because some of you are like, well, how do I even do this thing? Here's the best way I've learned how to do it. A friend of mine, Jonathan Murillo, really helped me through this in a season as well, giving me language. He called it having epiphany moments, which I think is very intense, but good stuff. I just call it the calling process. Like, it's a process. And so number one, I think everyone's calling is connected to a problem. So you actually don't start with you start with a problem. Lost people needed to be found. Gentiles needed to be reached. So Jesus found a Paul. The Jewish people were they were fish needing a fisherman, right? So he called Peter. The most probably obvious example is, right, it says in Exodus that the nation of Israel cried out and the Lord heard their prayers. And then the next chapter is the burning bush moment. Like, you have to understand, your burning bush moment was unto someone's cries that they need Jesus. It was not even about you in a lot of ways, even though it was. He loves us and us to give us work and calling and mission. So that way we're not out here purposeless. This is why the number one classes that are filling up universities right now, that for the last few years have been, what is my purpose? They're literally filling up Ivy League and high level education stuff because they don't, like, young people don't know. So the purpose of God is such a gift from God. It really is. But it's connected to a problem. So what's the problem? And for some of you, it doesn't even have to be like this massive thing where it's like you got to save the world. It could just be something little. Like, it bothers me that people are so sad, or it bothers me that people don't have fathers, or it bothers me that people don't worship Jesus, or it bothers me that people stay sick and broken. And there needs to be something, like, they can experience Jesus as healer that can transform their life. Bothers me that they don't know the reality of God. Life, that's like my problem. Like, so I would start with the problem. What's the thing because that's how you're going to work out of overflow. What's the thing that keeps you up at night? What's the thing that wakes you up in the morning? What's the thing that you would, the best way my friend described it, what would you do if you did for free? What would you do if no one ever thanked you for it? What would you do because you just feel the heart of God on it?
Yeah.
What's that problem? Okay, so number one, what's the problem? Define the problem. Number two would be, what's the dream? What's the dream of your heart? Connected to that problem, right? So for me, it would be people coming to know Jesus and transformation and prodigals and da-da-da. And so I have a dream in my heart that at the end of my life, again, it's just different. I've worked through this. I spent like a whole year and a half, 2 years, and I'm still walking through this every month. So this is, again, a developing thing. So you're not going to land it like today. But early on, I was like, man, what if my life can touch 1 million people in California? Like, I just had a random big number, like God number. Like, what if my life can touch 1 million people? That's the dream of my heart. Now, that doesn't mean preach to 1 million people. That can be through church planting. That can be through things I feel I'm gifted in: writing, church planting, and those are the three: writing, church planting, and preaching. That's what I think I'm going to do with my life. I'm going to write. I'm going to preach. I'm already preaching, so that's good. we're church planning next January. Okay, going there. And then just working on the content writing thing, okay? But there's a dream. And then you kind of, with that dream, craft a vision. Like, what's a vision statement for your life? So the same way we do like the vision statement of home church, the same way we do a vision statement for the table barbecue, the same way we do a vision statement for Elisha's riddle, like have a vision statement for your life. Have like a catchy phrase that you can refer to. Like, have something that will just remind you, like, this is who I am. And if you don't want to craft the vision like in a catchy phrase, then at least number 4, create values. What are give me 5 values that matter to you, that are connected to your calling and your identity. And I'll tell you this is a great way how you know if you're called to the right church, because your values should line up with their values. At minimum, like 2/3. Like, majority of your values should be their values. So it's crazy when people are like, well, how do I know what church I should go? Like, what matters to you? What are you called to? And it's like, well, I don't know that. Well, then how do you know if you even like that church? You are so focused on outward stuff. But if you line up with their values, now the church also has to have values that are very clear. But your values should be their values. And steal people's values. Like, you don't have to wordsmith it. Like, if presence is one and you like that's one of your values. Like, but for me, like, these values came out of an overflow, not just of this place, but of my heart. Naturally, servanthood's not one of my values. I'll just be 100. But I know this place serves people well. And I don't disagree with it. So I know I'm struggling. I got to work on it. Nessa's like, yeah, okay. But like, healing's one. And like, family's a value of mine. And presence is definitely a value of mine. And mission's a family of mine. But even when we were like Thrive 5, right? Like, okay, faith was easy. Faith was a value of mine. And yeah, function, you got to function out of who you are. And finance, actually, no, finance is a value of mine. And like, right? But like, there's certain things that are connected to like your values that you should be able to resonate with. And if you just are like part of a spiritual family that you don't resonate with anything that they believe in, not necessarily what they do, but what they champion and what they believe in, it's like, oh, maybe that's why you're always fighting in your heart. Nothing's ever good enough. Most people, they just sum that up to theological preference. Most people, it's, I like AG theology, so I'm going to go to AG church. I like Foursquare theology, I'm going to go to Foursquare church. I like Baptist theology, I'm going to go to Baptist church. I actually think it's a little deeper. You have theological, I'm going to call it preference for now, but theological preference, conviction. And then you have your personal, like, values. And some of you might just have 3, like family, the gospel, and love. And as long as that church, I feel that in those, if I feel my church does those 3 things, we're good. If I feel my church does 2 of those 3 things, we're good, right? So, but what are your values? And as a staff member, your values shouldn't be this place's values. Your values should hopefully connect with these values, but you should have your own values because your family should have their own values. So you can break down. You should have your own values. Your marriage should have their own values. Your family dynamic should have there should be things that kind of resonate. You have value. Your kids should have their own value. Like, this is what we value as a family, right? We value this, right? Things like that. And you just kind of, I have them written down on a little note. Like, I'll just share mine. Like, it's literally a note on my phone called Calling. And it's been here for like 4 years. And it's just little quotes the Lord's given me. Like, you need to focus on the calling for healing on your life. Don't know when he told me that, but that was really good. If you're not healthy, how can you release healing? Bam, there you go. Do you have capacity for more? Finishing well increases capacity. Okay, thanks, God. Cool. What are my values? I just have 3: authenticity, healing, and change. If I'm not functioning out of those values, I'm not me. That's all. And of course, it's connected and rooted in the gospel, right? You know, what is my values? What are my dreams? Cool. Then number 5, give language to the mission. That's easy. So you could just create phrases. You can write it out. You can process it. That one, again, is kind of like the vision statement, but that's helpful for people who need to write it out more. I would throw like 20 words that resonate with you and land on 5 and just get really passionate about those 5, right? And then I would say if 0 out of the 5 are disconnected to us or don't connect with us somewhat, I guess we can have a talk, but I don't think that happened because you all are here and you want to be here, so which is good. And then number 6, you refine your skill. I believe your skills are connected to your calling. So if I feel called, right? So Paul was called to the Gentiles. So he wasn't just called to be a preacher. He wasn't called to be an entrepreneur. He wasn't called to be a writer in some ways. He did those things to accomplish his calling. So you need to start looking at the things you do on how you accomplish the calling, which is Jesus' mission for you. Those things aren't your calling. And this is what we went wrong, especially my generation of discipleship, which was like the Master's Commission generation of discipleship, was like, you're called to be a youth pastor. You're called to be a worship pastor. You're called to be a young adult pastor. You're called to be a lead pastor. You're called to be nothing. You ain't gonna make it. Like you don't. So then what we told people is, unless you're called to church work, you don't have a calling. And we messed people up because then they felt less than. And then what makes it different than this sacerdotal reality? Sacerdotal is a fancy word for minister. This ministerial reality that priests have with Catholics, and the priests only do the work because they're special. No, it's like the equipping of the saints. Everyone has a calling. So my friend does these. He's like, he does these with businesses. He's like, oh, your business's calling isn't to do construction. You're a justice company. Like you bring justice and you bring ethical building to people who steal from people. You give people jobs. So actually your calling's not to build buildings. Your job is to create legacy for families to send their kids to college, or like everything has to have a deeper why. Everything has to have a deeper why in your heart, because if it doesn't, in some ways you kind of lose steam. Like the why fuels your heart. And then what you do then is you got to follow your calling with the skill, and you got to get good at it. Like I remember Ray Hughes one time, he was talking about worship. He's like, you worship leaders need to stop like giving your half best, like give it all you got. Like you all need to go to school. Y'all need to like learn how to learn music. Y'all need to like do your thing. Because if you don't, like, and he's just using worship as an example. He was just ranting. He's like, you all think you're musicians and you're not even trying. Like you need to do it. So same thing. Like if you're great at your job, get better at it. If you feel like that skill is connected to your calling. So I'm never going to arrive as a communicator. Like, let's just use that one. Like, I always need to get better at communication. I always need a question. I always need to get coached. I always need to take classes. I always need to go to conferences. I need to hang out with other communicators that are better than me. Like, refine your skill, right? And then lastly, find a mentor. Find a mentor, find a pastor, find a spiritual father, find a coach. Coaches will save you so much time. Mentors will save you so much time than you experiencing it yourself. Like, experience is not the best way to learn sometimes. So if you're going to take your calling serious, anyone who takes anything serious in this world has someone that is coaching them. Yes. No professional athlete has no coach. Like, if anything, they have multiple coaches. How many coaches do they have? How many people do they have that are speaking into their skill? Mm-hmm. Who speaks into your skill? That's why I have so many people that I reference all the time. And they don't even have to be like alive. You can also have like people who they're mentoring you from their books, from their sermons, from their, like, I also think there's something about people that are alive that are in your life. I think that's a healthy and important. But yeah, like there's so many ways in different aspects and avenues you can get mentored. Find a mentor. Okay? Last thoughts, and I'm going to close. I told you I had a lot today, so I just wanted to bombard you with it. Okay, cool. What a calling is not. So here's how to define your calling. And again, a lot of these notes too, they're for you, but also I know all of you are having conversations with individuals about this stuff. Here's what a calling is not. Number 1, a calling is not a position. I don't believe you're called to a position. I believe there's a deeper calling. Now, I believe positions are, and it's the same as number 2, but positions, titles, there's a connection to that with identity, and there is scriptural backing on the idea of titles. So the position's I like that phrase a little better. I really believe they're assignments, right? I really believe they're assignments. And you need to learn how to identify what you're called to versus what you're assigned to. Okay? I was assigned to be a youth pastor. I was assigned to be an executive pastor. I was assigned to be a lead pastor. right? I'm assigned to be a father. Why? Because God gave me kids. Like, apparently I'm assigned to be the lead pastor of Lathrop because I'm in Lathrop, right? Like one day, if I'm not the lead, this is why, because one day when you're not the thing, that doesn't mean you're not called anymore. That's why that's important. Just because you don't have the pastor title or the authority title or the director title doesn't mean you're not called anymore. Even people who fall, they're still called. The calling's irrevocable. They just can't function maybe out of that authority because of the life that they lived. Or someone, how many pastors have we met that they got done dirty? That doesn't mean they're not called either because they lost the position. Okay? Number 2, calling is not vocation. I don't believe calling is a job. It's not a vocational title. It's something deeper. I don't believe Pastor Juan is, I believe Pastor Juan's called to do worship, and he can define that, but I don't believe he's called just to be a worship pastor. That's not the calling on his, and the reason why we do that is because it's easier to do that work. It's easier to just, you're good at music, you're called to be a worship pastor. Now, obviously, bro, you do great as a worship pastor, but like, it's just easier, right? You're a preacher, you're called to be a lead pastor. It's just easier to explain. Like, you're great with kids, you're a teacher, you're called to be a kids pastor. No, there's something deeper than that. The vocation is an expression of the calling.
Yes.
So why does that matter? Because let's say you work at Amazon. Let's say you work at Target. Let's say you work here. Let's say you work somewhere else. You're called to love on people. I talk about this pretty often, actually, with one of my cousins who I'm really close with, and he is he has the calling of a pastor on his life like you would not believe. I just don't think he would ever make it in a vocational pastor sense, because he'd probably get fired for saying something he's not supposed to, like 2 weeks in. But when, like, he is the pastor at every warehouse he works at. He's his manager, supervisor. They always promote him. Everyone loves him. He challenges, he calls. It's like the definition of a pastor is this dude. It just doesn't look like how it looks like for us. And then he presents the gospel and loves people well. And like, you've all met people who are evangelists that will never preach on a mic. The calling of like reaching the lost and the broken, like, dude, it's just, but it's not the vocation. So your calling it bleeds through your vocational reality. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Number 3, your calling's not a feeling. It has to be deeper than I feel called to this.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just a feeling. It's not just a feeling. And that's where mentors and skills help. Okay? It's not a feeling. I think you all understand what I mean by that. Number 4, it's not just a philosophy. Your calling is not just a culmination of ideas. Because I think some people can just identify so that's why this conversation of calling is complicated. It's not just a culmination of ideas. Well, if I'm good at this and I like this and I feel this and I feel the goosebumps for this, I must be called to this. It's not just a philosophical concept. It's from Jesus. And the only way you can know who you are is you have to know who he is, right? And so it's connected to identity, not just a philosophy or a train of thought, okay? Similar to feeling, but feeling's more on the emotional sense. Philosophy is more on the intellectual sense, right? Your calling can be illogical in some ways, right? Some of the greatest preachers are the most intense introverts, right? Things like that. Like it might not make sense in some ways. And then lastly, your calling is not just a gifting. Just because you're good at something doesn't mean you're called to it either. I will say, if you're bad at something, I think it's very hard to be called at it. But just because you're good at something doesn't mean, I met great people that are good communicators, but doesn't mean they're called to a specific thing. You know what I'm saying?
I'm but I don't have a
Yeah, stuff like that. Like yeah. Cool. My heart for this conversation was just to challenge the room on how to identify your calling, what your calling is, and to function out of your calling. And I want you to, like, my heart as your leader is to function out of your calling. Of course, there's days we have to do things we don't like. The 80-20 rule, you ever heard that? As long as 80% of the job you like, you're great. Most of the world, it's like 50-50. So there's going to be 20% of the job you don't like. That's just work. That's just it. But that's where we don't put everything, our heart and soul, into just a work vocation. It's deeper. We're bleeding out this thing that we're called to. Any questions? What a long one, but any questions of clarity or yeah, go ahead, Pastor Matt.
I think I think you kind of mentioned like take a couple months, flesh it out.
Mm-hmm.
Like how would you go about doing that? I guess you kind of hit it, but just if you could be more like
Yeah. So
you submit that to someone. Hey, does this make sense? What's your process and like?
yeah. So I did it with someone that I trusted. I would say find someone you trust to have these conversations, or we could take it a step deeper. I know how to walk through this with individuals.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to walk through this a little bit more, we could just set up a one-on-one and we can talk about it. So just text me, say, hey, actually that conversation really spoke to me and you're not bothering me. You guys know you have access to me, like unequivocally. No one else has access to me other than the board, than this room. You guys call me even on days off, right? As long as my phone's not off. Like I answer, I'm there. Like you will never not have my number. You will never not have access. You can always just say, hey, we need to talk, right? Of course, when I was down and I was busy, it was hard, especially for stuff like this. Like for work stuff, maybe go to your exec for sure. But this is like your heart and what you feel. Yeah. So I can do it. You can meet with your exec. But what I would say though is don't come in processing it together. Come in with some homework done. Like do the 7 steps. Like what's your problem? What's the problem you identify with in this world? What's the dream of your heart? Craft kind of somewhat of a vision or mission. Yeah. Give me 5, 7 values. Give me 10 at least. Like, hey, I can't go them down. What do you feel you're good at? Right? Let's talk about that. What are you good at? Let's like don't have a false humility. I think I'm good at this. Okay, cool. And then who's going to speak into these things in your life? Like list your mentors. Who is it? It's myself. This person is like I can go down the list of okay. I go to this person for this things. I go to like for me. I do it on the health spectrum. So who's my person relationally? Who's my person like spiritually? Who's my person emotionally? Who's my person, physically? Right now that was like my old like gym coach, and now I don't have that. So like I got to find someone new. But like right, like you should be able to and be like I don't have someone for that right now. That way it doesn't feel like one person has to be everything. Right? Like spiritually right now, the guy who's checking my heart is a guy named Dallas Willard, and he's not alive, and I'm just reading his books, and he is provoking me. And he's like, he's telling me through his writings, like, man, I am so complacent in some ways of my heart. And it's so good. Back in the day, it was like Corey Russell. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and he was alive, but I didn't know him. So it was kind of like he wasn't alive because I didn't know him. Like, Pastor Eric's always going to be my relationship guy. That's just who I call relationship, church dynamics, make sure my heart's okay. He's my emotional relationship guy. He always has been, right? Certain things, like you just find certain things and who are you accountable to? Yeah, so bring that list. So I would say if you want to flesh this out, but don't come in and be like, help me.
No, for sure. That's what I'm trying to
Yeah, you gotta do some of the work. Okay, another question, another thought. Sure, yeah.
I know you said that only you can fight for your calling.
Yep.
A lot of people in the room are married. When you're married, do you feel like it's still individual, or do you feel like your spouse should also, because they know also what your calling is, are they just like an accountability partner, or what does that look like?
Yeah, so I think the spousal dynamic is, of course, that's why I said you can champion, challenge, provoke. But if you just give up, your spouse can't help you not give up. You know what I'm saying? In the same way you can damage your calling, it's the same way, in a way, like where, wow, like let's say you cheat on your spouse, and now this call is, even though it's not going to go away, the reality of it is going to look completely different. And you're going to have to go through all sorts of crazy. Your spouse had nothing to do with that. So in that same way, opposite way, you have to, like, you can't depend on your spouse to get you through on the calling side. There's other things your spouse, I think, can help you with. But there's no way you're going to make me preach again. That's what I'm trying to say. There's no way you're going to make me do what I'm called. Because it's most of it is invisible. That's why. Most of it's internal. So you can't, how do I explain it a little bit deeper? Yeah, like you can't control it. They can't control it. It's part of who you are. Because they can't control your identity either. That's a part of it. They can't change who you really are. Yeah. Habits, behavior. But again, remember, and this is a bigger breakdown of, yeah, habits change, behaviors change, but identity, it really only changes with the Lord. And if something does change that is not of you, what is now happening is false self is created. And if false self is created to please your spouse, and this is why I actually think a lot of spouses who marry and they go into ministry and then they end up possibly getting divorced because one ends up being done with ministry, is maybe there was a pressure to create a false self for the other spouse to please that spouse because of the version of Christianity they believe they wanted. Does that make sense? So just because the behavior changes and everything's good. And then that's where like the midlife crisis happens. And then 10 years later, who was this person I married? Because we never really walked through identity questions in the first place. We married someone for who we wanted them to be, not who they actually really were. And so things like that can fall into place. Again, I don't think that's anybody in this room. I'm just saying we've all seen couples like that, and that's a little tough. That's hard. Yeah.
An internal healing only comes from the Lord, no other person.
Right.
And for some reason, it's hard for humans to accept that or walk in that. You know, how many people have we met with when we've challenged, well, you need to work on just you and the Lord. You need to work on just you and the Lord. I always say, okay, put him over here. And it's just hard for people. Put him over here and work on, what is the Lord saying?
For sure.
What do you need to be healed?
Yeah.
Ask the Lord to reveal the things in you.
Yeah, what do you need to work on?
That need to be tended to. So I think it's unhealthy when we're leaning on somebody else, or trying to change someone else, or trying to force someone else. Unhealth is always going to rise to the surface. It's always going to rise to the surface. So we have to tend to what's internal, and only the Lord can heal that.
Yeah. Can I give one more example? I think that's really good. So Bible's pretty clear that Peter follows Jesus. Peter was married most of that time. Some people say he got married after, but for the most part, most scholars believe he was married. And then the Bible says Peter dies on an upside down cross. His wife dies next to him on a cross as well. That's church history. But his wife was never going to make Peter die on that cross. Like that, his wife couldn't tell him, hey, you're doing that. And vice versa. Peter can never tell her, you have to do that as well. So that's the dynamic. At the end of the day, it's still a decision. And Peter really had to fight for that calling because he went from denial to that restoration process. And like his wife really isn't in the picture at all during that time. Actually, it was John. And John was kind of actually even kind of hating on it in some ways and like, okay, he's going to do him then, I guess. And so, yeah. Yeah, so yeah. But how you fight doesn't have to be on your own either. That's also the lie. Like, I'm not saying you have to be on your own. I'm just saying you have to be the initiator.
Yes. Absolutely.
And you have to work that out with the Lord. And that's an internal thing always. That's feeling. Yeah. Pastor Ben.
How would you disconnect what you're passionate about as what you're actually called to?
Yeah, I think I would start with values. Like, what are your values? And then what are your skills? And I think a lot of people don't even know what their values are. So I would just start there. And I think it's okay to be passionate about things, but I would want to function out of my values as much as I can, and then my skills. And hopefully those two can overlap as much as we can. So that's what I would say. Start with the values first. If you don't even have defined values. And if you're married, I would have that values conversation with your spouse. Because you can think you have values, Because I've done that with Nessa. Like, here are my values. And she goes, really? That's like one of your values? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, no, you don't do anything that feels like that's a value to you. And I was like, really? She's like, yeah. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, authenticity, I think that works for us. Like, I think I'm too much myself in some ways. Like, I'm very authentic.
Especially in a car parking lot.
Yeah, for sure. But like healthiness, maybe there were seasons where it wasn't. I forgot which one. I gave her like a bunch one time.
Yeah, it was good.
And she's like, that sounds like what you want to be. That don't sound like you. And, you know, unless the Lord like gives you a word, then you're good too. But you better be on it. Bless you. You know what I mean? So, yeah. Yep. Yeah, I think a lot of us, what tends to happen is we're passionate about opportunities, not about calling. And in a lot of this ministry game, we're opportunistic. This is going to help you learn to say yes and say no.
Yes, absolutely.
Because in this game, you need to learn how to say no just as much as you need to say yes. You know what I mean? Of course, we'll ask you to do things to help. I'm not saying that. I mean, there's always going to be opportunities to do more. The poor you'll always have. That's what Jesus says, right? So there's certain. So like Obed has always felt a call on his life. One of the things that helps with callings too, with values, is the people you're called to. So that will help too. Like if you also need help with line up values, your gifts, and I would say God calls you to people. He doesn't call you to positions. I forgot I said that. So I needed to say thank you for whoever, the question you asked just brought that up. Like, right, Paul was called to the Gentiles. So at a young age, Pastor Obed talked about how God said, I will make you a voice to young people for the rest of your life. So he will preach at every youth conference he's invited to as long as they can afford him to go. Like, as long as they can pay for the flight and cover him. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, that's how he came to run this town. Because it was a thing that the Lord put in him when he was like 16 years old. Like, you are called to young people. So I don't feel called to young people. I'll be completely honest. Like, I'm called to California people. Like, my unless the Lord changes that, right now I'm bleeding California. I'm bleeding the people of my state. Yeah, I'll travel other places, but that's where it's like, okay, same conference, let's say 1,000 people conference here, 1,000 people conference in California. The only thing that would change is how am I really good friends with this guy over here in Texas? But if it's a random person and a random person, Texas or California? California. It helps me say yes or no to things. It's why I'm staying in my network, because our network is called to California. They're pastors in California. We do these pastors gatherings for California. Like, it just, you're going to notice everything we do in a lot of ways just bleeds. And that's how it should be. It should just bleed out of, yeah. And then I want your areas that it should bleed. Like, your identity should bleed into your thing that you're called to. Like, I love the content creation and the writing and the joy that our kids feel like in kids. That's why I think you were called to it, because there's a deeper calling to you, right, Dill? And things like that, right? There's examples of that. Like, Tracy's going to feel like Matt. It's going to be home church, but it's going to feel a lot like Matt. It should. If it doesn't, it's weird. And this is where again, it's weird. Then it gets like carbon copy stuff. And we're not a franchise. We're not cookie cutter. There is a interpersonal thing there in some ways. I'm excited that like Pastor Luis is location pastor here, because I felt like Lathrop needed to feel like what Pastor Luis has on his life. This very similar to me, actually, and a call to like healthiness. And we talked about that, and Pastor Luis joked. He's like, man, then that means I might get sick again. No, I don't want to get sick. And we were joking, but yeah, like this healing thing, like he just carries it. Like he's just incredibly healthy as well. And there's other core values that resonate. And I was like, yeah, like, so when I see, like, just so you know too, you don't have to have this on your life, but this is something that I guess I feel I do well, is I see those things on you guys. I'm not just seeing gifts. I'm not seeing that Nati can design something good. I'm not seeing that Ben could take a photo. I'm not seeing that Juan played the guitar well. Those you got to see beyond that. I'm like, so I don't want the job done just as much as I want you in it. Like, I want, for however long the Lord would call you to it. Again, jobs are jobs. It's different. But like, your heart brings something to the table. You know, like when we first hired you, Pastor Antonio, like you were so excellent in the little things that you did as an intern and as you were like in the in-between. Everything you touched was like really excellent. I was like, man, if he can bring that to this and this area and this area and this area, like you just, whether you like it or not, like you're just, right? And you would just say you're OCD, but it's deeper than that. Like it's just who you are. And that's good. But then there's other, like, so I see those things and I want those things, right? Same thing with like when Megan came on and Megan was developing. And so one of the things you want to have someone to do a good job in finances is someone who can tell you no and to pull back. Like there's a boundary thing. There's a thing she carries, but also you don't feel horrible after you talk to her either.
No.
But there's a thing that she right? It's and I don't know what that word is, but there's something in her that leaks out in every part of her life. It's not just because she does the job well. Pastor Nati, the things you do well, like it leaks in part of everything you do in your life, in your business, in your marriage, it's like, yeah, I want that. I don't want just, here's the job description. Does that make sense? Cool. Oh, someone's calling. All right. Any other questions? Any other thoughts? Probably need to kill this meeting.